how we think it should be in a fine dining environment, we try to make sure that the guest is living content. So it's not about giving them something expensive, it's about giving them something that matches their food and matches the mood and matches the moment.
I like that.
So whenever someone is asking me about how they should pair a certain dish with some sake, I just try to imagine the flavor profile of the dish, of course, in conjunction to the sake I want to recommend. So cost is, at least in our restaurant, cost is not the primary concern. It's all about the guest experience here, and this is what fine dining should be all about.
Hey guys, this is Sid Patel, CEO of London Wine Competition, London Beer Competition, London Spirits Competition. We are at this amazing Lucky Cat Gordon Ramsay restaurant, live from London Mayfair. I have here Savvas with me, one of the leading sake sommeliers in UK, and we're going to touch base on sake, right? Savvas, what's your take on sake? What's happening with sake in UK? We did touch base a little bit during the competition, but let's pick some other areas which we've not touched base, right? What are you seeing, especially when it comes to Asian restaurant which we're sitting in? Are guests asking, or you still have to hand sell them? Is demand still there?
The demand is definitely there. The thing is that we cannot treat sake like we treat wine. So whenever a customer is coming, whenever one of our guests comes to our restaurant and they're asking for something to drink, like immediately their mind goes to wine, and we need to be there to make them aware that we're doing sake as well. It all comes hand in hand with the concept. So when you have like Asian cuisine, Japanese in particular, so you have to stray away from the traditional wine kind of oriented pairing, and then you have to kind of take their mind into something different, something more playful, like sake. So again, since I mentioned the word playful, sake is a bit more playful than wine when you pair it.
We chatted on that as well, right? Like, let's make it playful. Now, this is a classic example of how do you make it playful in a fine setting like this? You can only do some things, right? You can't just come up with a playful glass, and because otherwise it may disturb the aesthetics. I don't know, I'm just putting it out there. But let's say you were given a job to get consumers in the game of sake in this restaurant. How would you roll that program out?
Well, your passion needs to reverberate that through your how you communicate that to the guests. So usually when someone is inquiring for a drink, and then I introduce them to sake, exactly because their knowledge is a bit more limited than for wine. So that's where your passion and your way of transferring the energy and the love for sake comes into place. So it's very important. The role of a sommelier is very important on that particular moment. So whereas
to excite them, I guess.
Exactly. So whereas in wine, let's say someone would go for fish, and then immediately would think like, okay, so white wine, let's take a Riesling or a Sauvignon Blanc. That's not the case with sake. So with sake, it's all about being playful and experimenting with flavor. So because it's something new that is not being introduced into our culture, at least, or our culinary culture here in the UK. So the sommelier has the task, he is tasked into introducing these kind of new flavors to the guests. So we can play around with the style of sake.
What are the customer cues that you pick? Like, okay, let me upsell to this customer because I think maybe the food they've ordered, you think that can pair with sake, or the person is just curious and you can read that it's trying new stuff is not a problem. So give me some cues other sommeliers can use if they order this 5 dishes, let's say in an Asian restaurant. For sure, try to educate them on sake.
In our setup, at least, and how we think it should be in a fine dining environment, we try to make sure that the guest is living content. So it's not about giving them something expensive, it's about giving them something that matches their food and matches the mood and matches the moment.
I like that.
So whenever someone is asking me about how they should pair a certain dish with some sake, I just try to imagine the flavor profile of the dish, of course, in conjunction to the sake I want to recommend. So cost is, at least in our restaurant, cost is not the primary concern. It's all about the guest experience here, and this is what fine dining should be all about.
All right, now back on sake trends. Let me take this conversation to off-trade as well, right? Like, are people buying, are sakes available? Is the selection becoming wider in the bottle shops of UK? Have you seen growth in sake?
Yes, definitely. So wherever I go out and go to a sake bar or a little izakaya, so it's all about the selection. That's why I'm saying it has to be playful, because you have so many different styles of sake which have very different flavor profiles. So for me it's very important to be able to taste that, so you can increase your palate, the knowledge of your palate and your exposure to the flavors of sake. So rather than having, let's say, in a list 20 Jinmai Ginjos, like similar-ish, like fruity on the fruitier, like floral style, it's good to have different styles, like a Honjozo, more on the drier side, than a Ginjo, more on the fruitier side, or maybe a Kimoto style of Yamahai style of sake, which is more like on the dairy, on the lactic side kind of flavor spectrum. So it's good to have a variety of different flavor profiles, so you can experiment a little bit. So what we're trying to, I'll give a very good example. What we're trying to experiment now in Lucky Cat is sake flights. So a guest can have the option, if they may, to have a little selection of very different styles of sake at the same time. So whenever they have a dish in front of them, they can play around with different styles.
That's
and
a good
see
example
what
of
works for them.
gamification, yeah.
Because it's not black and white when it comes to flavor, because we all have a different tongue. We have different flavor receptors in that tongue. So how you taste the wine is very different how I taste a drink, and consequently, you need to be able to experience and expose yourself to all kinds of flavors and decide what works for you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I see in sake personally is I have no idea how it's going to taste. Let's say when as a guest, right? It's like, what surprise is coming now, right? So let me evaluate. Let me see. Now you can either go, yes, I loved it, or oof, what is this? I'm just throwing it out there because I want to go to the next question, which is, can there be techniques where their surprise levels can go down, maybe by sampling, or do you do other things that you are minimizing that curiosity of what is it going to be?
That's a great question, and we do. That's where again the role of the sommelier is so important, because you have to break it down to clusters of flavor. So how I like to do it is when a guest is inquiring about sake, my first question is would you like something on the drier side or on the fruitier side? So immediately you have two big clusters of flavor, and then they can guide you there. It's exactly like wine. Some people want to have dry citrus, refreshing wine. Some people want something more fruity, more floral with a touch of sweetness. It's exactly the same with sake. So this
what would be the closest beverage you would say, it's like this?
Something like an off-dry Riesling, I would say. So I would connect it to wine.
Understood. Anything else on sake as far as where people can learn? London consumers, are there any tastings going on, courses? What is the best way to learn about sake?
I mean, you have to. When it comes to education, you cannot have half knowledge. So again, I will have to recommend a well-established course for sake, for example, from WSET. I'm an educator for WSET for sake, so immediately that's what I would recommend. Level 1 for an introductory course. Now we have the level 2 coming out in the market. So if someone wants to go in depth, they can choose whatever level of knowledge they want to get and just go for it.
Nice. And any brands that you recommend them to try out or to ask in a restaurant, or any good names, any recommendations out there?
It's not much about the brand. I mean, brands like Dasai or Heaven Sake are well established in the European market, but for me it's all about the style. So it's good to introduce to our guests this kind of terms like Nama, which is unpasteurized, or Genshu, which is undiluted. So For me, this should be the key words that we should be focusing on. So people have they have the interest to go for something different.
I think one of the last question on one of the things that I see as an objection or hurdle is it's somehow associated with Japanese cuisine or Japanese restaurants only, right? Like, okay, I may get a sake in a Japanese restaurant, but you don't expect, or people don't even ask because they won't expect that you would get sake at other places. What's your take on that?
It's interesting that you ask that because before I get involved into the Japanese cuisine, I used to work for a restaurant with Indian cuisine. So we used to have sake there actually in our pairings, and it worked quite well because for me, it's all about like the big clusters of flavors. So in Japanese cuisine, you might have some spicy elements, but you have some spicy elements in the Indian cuisine.
True, so it can balance it, yeah.
Exactly. So if you use the right sake, maybe with a bit of sweetness, a bit on the fruitier side, so that will bring down the heat a little bit from the spicy dish, and so on and so forth. It's all about experimenting and being open-minded when it comes to flavor and food pairing.